Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can build hyper-personalized B2B outreach lists, and I'm going to show you the entire process. I'm going to tell you about why list building is the most important part of any outreach process. I'm going to show you what does that actually mean, because list building isn't as simple as it sounds. I'm going to show you how to find relevant companies. I'm going to show you how to enrich data to get social media profiles, and this is a method I've never shown anywhere else. I'm going to show you how to find decision makers from any company. I'm going to show you how to validate those decision makers, and I'm going to show you a deep validation method that nobody else is doing. So stick around. It's going to be a long video, but there's going to be a ton of value. Okay. Now, with that being said, let's get right into it. So let's get something clear before we start this video. And that thing is that everybody has their own opinion on what is the most important part of an outreach process, right? Now, some people think it's the copy. Some people think it's the call to action. Some people think it's the value that you provide within the message or within the email. Some people think that it's the time of day, the time of week, this and that, right? But in reality, it's all noise in comparison to building your list the right way, right? Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple examples to really set this point in, right? Now, you could write the absolute best copy in the world, right? Absolute best copy in the world. And if the wrong person is reading it, it's irrelevant, right? We've all heard the quote, copy directed at everybody copy meant for everybody is good for nobody, right? Meaning you need to be writing to the person that you want to be reading, right? And I'll give you an example. Now, imagine you go and you're not a smoker and you read a 10 out of 10 award-winning cigarette commercial, right? It's not going to do anything to you. You're not all of a sudden going to want to smoke, because you're not a smoker. It's not a relevant commercial to you. It's a good commercial, just not for you, right? Now, imagine you go and you write the most compelling call to action in the entire world. But if it's just to somebody who can't benefit from it, they won't care. Now, imagine someone offers to restore your vision, but you're just not blind. It doesn't matter to you. That's an amazing call to action, right? Imagine telling a blind person, let me restore your vision. Of course, that's an amazing call to action. But to someone who can see perfectly fine, that's not a good call to action, right? Meaning your call to action doesn't really matter if you're not sending it to the right person. Now, imagine someone sent you an email, and in that email, there was amazing value. It could, you could legitimately even offer a full guide on how to make a company's advertisements 10 times more effective, 50 times cheaper, and 100 times more memorable. But if you send it to the cashier of the company, he's still not going to care because it's not any of his business, right? So the point I'm trying to get across is all of these other factors like call to actions, copy, value, this and that, none of it is relevant if you're sending emails to the wrong person. And building that list is going to be the foundation of your outreach campaign. It's the most important part. Okay, that's why this video is so long, because there's so much that goes into it. Okay, now the point is, before you can worry about any part of the outreach process, you need to get your preliminary parts done first, which is what I'm going to talk about. Now, that includes list building. That's pretty much all list building, matter of fact. Okay, now let's get right into it. Now, what does list building really mean, right? Now, I'm sure you're wondering to yourself, what does that actually mean? Now, obviously, the act of building a list is just, putting together a bunch of items, but what does that actually entail? What does that actually look like, right? Now, building a list is the action of, number one, finding relevant companies. Number two, enriching that data to get social media profiles. Number three, finding decision makers from those companies. Number four, validating decision makers. And number five, sometimes, and I'll talk about that sometimes, it's the act of going through deep verification, okay? Now let's get right into it. Step number one, finding relevant companies. Now, step number one is going to be just finding the company to begin with. Before any validation, you got to actually find the companies. Now, by far, this step is the hardest step in the entire process. Now, reason being is because there's not one way of doing things. The other methods that I'll show you, it's pretty straightforward. Like you kind of just do this. It's the same thing every single time. But in this process, you need to really get creative. And I'll give you guys an example later on. Okay? Now, you need to know your tools because these are the data sources where you're going to be getting your leads from. Okay? Now, these are kind of the most popular tools that we use in our agency. There's tons of them. This is nowhere near an accurate list of all the tools in the market. There's hundreds of them, but these are the ones that we use. Apollo, Google My Business, D7 Lead Finder, Store Leads / Brand Nav. We kind of use them interchangeably. Built with Wapalizer, G2, and Crunchbase. Now, all of these different tools, they have different applications. Like Apollo can really be used for anything. Google My Business is kind of best for local businesses. D7 Lead Finder, also best for local businesses. Store Leads and Brand Nav, only e-com. Built with, it could really be used for anything. Wapalizer could really be used for anything. It's kind of like Built with, just a little bit different. G2, specifically for SaaS. Now, for those of you that know what G2 is, it's not necessarily a leads platform, but it is a big place with a lot of SaaS companies. And if you are looking to target SaaS companies, G2 would be a very good place to go and get these SaaS companies, right? And then Crunchbase, which is also not necessarily a data platform, but you could get a lot of data, especially recently funded SaaS companies. And something I really want to emphasize is, even in our agency, there's not one set way to do things. Whenever a client comes to us and they need to target somebody, almost always we end up coming up with a new data source, and a lot of the stuff we do is custom, right? Meaning, you guys really have to realize that there's not going to be one set easy way of doing this. It really just depends on what you're doing. I'll give you an example down the line. But the reason that building a list is so much harder than it seems is because it's not as simple as just choosing one relevant data source, pulling the data, and that's it, right? That never happens maybe in an ideal reality, but not in actual reality, right? A lot of these platforms, you're not just going to directly scrape from them. And I'll give you an example. Apollo is way too expensive to scale or to scrape at scale, right? If you actually use Apollo the way it's meant to be used by paying Apollo, like it's crazy. Like it's not realistic, right? And I'll talk about the prices later. For something like this, you need to use a third-party scraper like exportapollo.io, okay? And I have no affiliation with these people. For Google My Business, which is something that we have amazing results for, you need to either use a public tool, which I'm not familiar with any. I'm sure they exist, but I'm not personally familiar, or you need to create your own. Now, personally, in our agency, we've been doing lead gen for quite a while, and we have very high volumes. So we're at the point where we build our own tools, right? We're no longer using public tools. We have our own Google My Business scraper. We have our own Apollo scraper. All of these things we have on our own. But when we started, we didn't have our own. And there are public solutions which you guys can go and use, and they'll be just as good. I'm not going to name any specifically for Google My Business because I don't have any, but we use a public one. Or I'm sorry, we use a private one, but you guys use a public one. Now, G2 and Crunchbase are also not the easiest when it comes to data extracting. So you'll need to figure out some sort of data scraping as well. Now, again, G2 is one of those situations where it was never even meant to be a leads database, but because of the nature of the people that use G2, it's going to very quickly become an amazing data source if you are looking to do something like SaaS as a targeting method, okay? Now, this is difficult, and especially if you're not very technical, you're going to feel very overwhelmed by the thought of having to hire a developer to make like a scraper, but this is the name of the game. All of the people at the top are using scrapers like this, and I know because I speak to a lot of these people who, they have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 followers, and they're authorities, they're thought leaders in the space. They all have their own custom tools. A lot of the guys on top have developers full-time just to make these sorts of tools. So if you want to excel, you can't just rely on using other people's tools. You're going to have to go and you're going to have to start getting in the ritual of being able to hire someone and being able to use someone else's talent in order to make these tools and get more data. Because in the end of the day, outreach is old data. Whoever has the best and the most data is the one who's going to come out on top, okay? Now, a lot of the time, getting a good outreach list together isn't as just black and white as just using one tool, right? But rather using several tools in conjunction to make a very good lead list. Now, I'm going to give you guys an example which actually happened to me, which this is a real thing that we did for a real client, right, in our agency, Borks, and we had amazing results doing this. Now, imagine I told you that let's target home service business owners that are already running Facebook ads, right? Those were the two requirements. They have to be home service business owners that are already running Facebook ads. And let's add in that they also have to be US based and they also have to have 5 to 20 employees, right? Now, you're not going to do that on Apollo. You're not just going to put the technology feature on Apollo is horrible. Like you can't do that, right? There's not really an easy way to do that on one platform. In this situation, what we did is we launched a Google My Business scraper to scrape HVAC near me or roofing near me queries, meaning we do like a home service and near me, right? And I'll show you guys, right? Just so you see, if I search roofing near me, you'll see that these things come up right here, right? These Google My Business listings, Lightning Construction, CGC Manalapan Roofing and Siding. And if you click get more or see more businesses, you can see how many of these there are, right? And this is just near me, how many listings there are. There's tons of them. And what I would do is I would get a scraper built that could scrape all of this. And we have something like that, right? That's what we use internally for clients. Now, once you have that data, you would configure in a way to only return the listings with websites. The companies don't have a website, just ignore them. Okay? Then I would take those and I would put them into built with and apply technology filters to them to only return the leads that have either Facebook pixels or go high level embeds like a calendar or like something like that, like a form, something like that on there. Now, because if they have a Facebook pixel or if they have go high level, the odds of them running ads are pretty high, right? There's no completely, 100% guaranteed way to know if they're running ads, but realistically speaking, if they have a pixel and they have go high level embeds, they're either running ads right now or they've run ads in the past, meaning in both situations they're qualified. Okay. Now, after I did that, I would use a website enrichment tool, and I'm going to touch on what exactly I mean by this later, but just for the sake of this, let's just get through it. I'm going to put this through a website enrichment tool, and I'm going to get their social media platforms. And one of the social media platforms that we'd scrape is Facebook, especially for home service businesses. Almost all of them have Facebooks, right? And by doing that, I would get a list of Facebook profiles that are all running Facebook campaigns. They're obviously in the US since I scraped the ones that are near me. And obviously they're running either Facebook ads or they've ran Facebook ads in the past since they have the pixel on their website. Now, at this point, I could do one of two things. I could either launch the campaign straight up and not do the person filter, or I could go onto a third step, put that into Apollo, add the people filter, right? And then export those people, right? In this particular situation, I'd probably just launch without the people filter just because of the fact that, there's not too many home service businesses on Apollo in the first place, right? Apollo, kind of works on LinkedIn data. And a lot of these home service guys, they're not on LinkedIn. So I'd probably just launch immediately, right? Then I'd use a script like, hey, I'm a local in town and I saw you guys were running Facebook ads, small world, but I actually own a marketing company myself. Do you mind if I send over some tips on how you can improve them? And imagine, I live in Old Bridge in New Jersey, right? That's where I'm at. And I can imagine that if I was a contractor and I got a message saying, hey, I'm a local in Old Bridge and I saw you guys were running Facebook ads. I'm just curious because I own a marketing company myself. Do you mind if I send over a document just showing how you guys could be doing that better? Why would someone say no to that, right? Nobody in their right mind would think that that is some sort of automatic message, right? They're going to realize, okay, I am running ads. That's one method of segmentation. I am in Old Bridge. That's another method of segmentation. And the third method is that, they are an HVAC company and you'd mentioned some sort of HVAC related asset or some sort of home service related asset. And you got 3 points of segmentation on there all at once. And that's going to be an outreach campaign that ripped for us. That's not the exact script we used because I can't necessarily leak the exact scripts we used, but you guys get the point, right? You really have to start thinking and being creative on how you get leads because this isn't 2020 where you could just scrape leads from one place and all of a sudden it works, right? You guys have to really, really, really get creative with how we're getting this data now, okay? Now, in that particular situation, that is hyper segmented, both based on town and technologies, and it would perform a lot better than a generic message, just like, hey, are you guys looking for Facebook ads? Or like, hey, are you guys looking for this? Okay? Now, that's how I would find relevant companies, right? And again, it really determined on what you want to do. If I had a list of a method for every single industry, this video would be 5 hours long. But I gave you guys the list of tools. Just go through them. There's tutorials for every single one of these tools online. It's a trial and error process. So just go through it. Okay? Then enriching data. Now, I'm going to show you guys a crazy way of enriching websites that for some reason I've really never seen anybody else do aside from me. Okay? Now, if you pay close attention, it's a pretty common trend to include your social media links in the footer of a website. Now, right here, I'm going to show you guys an example. This is Edison Heating and Cooling. It's an HVAC company here in New Jersey, but this is available for everybody. It's SaaS companies, e-com companies, everybody does this, or at least the serious companies do it. They'll put their social media links in their footers, right? Now, if you took a list of websites And all of those companies are somewhat established, like there's, they're actual real companies, which most of you are targeting real companies, not like small companies, right? They're going to have their social media profiles somewhere in their footer. Now, imagine you had a tool which could go on these websites one by one, take all of the links present on that website, every single one of the links, and then just return the ones that start with facebook.com, instagram.com, twitter.com, youtube.com, linkedin.com. That should be LinkedIn, right? Not just linked, but I'll fix that after. You would basically be able to have like a big database of enriched websites, right? And this would act in two ways. Number one, it will filter out all of the ones that don't have social media. It's safe to assume that if a company doesn't have their social media profiles linked on their website, they're most likely not a serious company. And number two, you have this data to go and reach them on other platforms. And even if you're doing cold email, this is still useful to you because now you can do omni-channel outreach. You can hit them on other platforms. And if someone's going to see you, in every single social media platform and in their email inbox, the odds of them saying yes are much higher. Okay. Now then imagine you export all this data into a spreadsheet. And you have this data now. Now you would need to have some sort of enrichment tool, or if you did this, you would have an enrichment tool which isn't reliant on anything and has no rate limits whatsoever because, it's yours if you had a tool like that. Now, if you do DMs as a service, if you're a DM agency, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, doesn't matter, this tool would virtually give you unlimited leads. And if you really get creative with it, you could legitimately scrape from, for example, Apollo, and then get Facebook profiles. And now you could do DM outreach with the same accuracy of cold email, right? And if you start getting creative, you can really quickly start to see how a tool like this would be groundbreaking, right? Now, again, I've never seen anybody use this before, so I'm not personally familiar with any public tools out there on the market. Most likely speaking, like it's going to become a thing sooner or later, but as I said, at the moment, we have our own in the agency, which is we use internally. If you do want something like this done, I'll be honest with you guys, it's not that hard to make. It only took I think 2 or 3 hours to make something like this. So if you do want to go make something like this, go on Fiverr, go on Upwork, right? Find a developer. You guys have to start using new tactics, right? Marketing is very, very tied into development now, right? Those two things kind of work interchangeably. So if you guys don't know how to code and you're not technical, go hire a developer. Go on Fiverr. It'll cost you $50, maybe $100, and you'll have a tool like this just for yourself, and nobody else will have it. And you'll have a massive competitive advantage, okay? Now, the next part, we're going to talk about how to actually find decision makers. Now, this side of things is more for cold email rather than for cold DM. But even if you do just cold DMs, just watch this part because it's still relevant to you. Outreach isn't, it's not like it's a cold email versus cold DM. You got to do both if you want to be successful. Okay? Now let's talk about this. So let's say that you want to find decision makers. Now, this part is primarily for people who want to send cold emails, as a lot of the times with DMs, you're messaging companies, not necessarily direct employees. Okay? Now, here I'm going to show you how you can take a list of websites and return decision makers from those companies. Now, our platform of choice for enrichment is Apollo.com. It's the most popular data enricher on the market, and it's currently the best for cold outreach since there's a lot of third-party scrapers that are available that can allow you to scrape, right? Now, another alternative to Apollo is Clay.com. I've heard amazing things about Clay. It's a great tool, but it's obviously a lot more expensive since there aren't any Clay scrapers that I'm personally aware of. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys real quick this Apollo scraper and the prices, and I'm going to sort of tell you why I'm so glad Apollo scrapers exist, right? The only way it would make sense to use Apollo as a tool, and Apollo is a great tool, by the way, right, is under the circumstances that these scrapers are still around. Now, Apollo is way too expensive to actually maintain if you're going to pay directly Apollo. And I'll give you guys an example. Like, for example, right here, 25,000 unverified leads, and I'll touch on what that means later in the video, will run you $1,000. Now, just for reference, that 25,000 unverified leads is actually 12,000 real leads because you're going to lose 50% after verification. And I'm going to talk about verification later, but just for the sake of you guys understanding the numbers, you're paying $1,000 for 12K leads. For our clients, we usually run anywhere from maybe 1,000 to 1,500 DMs per day, 1,000 to 1,500 emails per day, meaning 12,000 leads would last us like 12 days or even less if we're running the 1500 option, right? And sometimes for other clients, we'll run 4,000 a day, 5,000 a day, depending on the client. Now, you can quickly start to see how we're not going to spend $2,500 a month per client on leads. That doesn't make sense, right? That's way too expensive to sustain, especially for some of our lower ticket clients. That's where these Apollo scrapers come in. Now, my favorite Apollo scraper, I don't use them because we have an internal solution, but when we didn't have an internal solution, this is what we used, exportapollo.io. Now, they charge, I think it's $3 per thousand, meaning for the same 25K, you're going to pay $75. Obviously, $75 and $1,000, very big difference, right? This is something that's sustainable, right? And again, we scrape a lot of leads, so very often we have to go make our own tools. Just like in this situation, we have our own scraper. But for the majority of people, for specifically the Apollo scraper, I would not recommend trying to make your own. It is a very, very tedious process. It's very difficult. It's not easy. It's not easy like the other tool I talked about. This is difficult. Just pay the $3 to export Apollo. And when you start really getting big as an agency or, really trying to send like crazy amounts of volume, then invest into Apollo scraper. Okay? But anyways, Apollo also has a very convenient feature which allows you to upload a list of company websites, and Apollo will actually take that list, match it to records in their database, and then display those records to you. So say you give it Amazon.com, it'll know that Amazon, like the company, the e-commerce platform, Amazon, has this website, and it'll return those decision makers to you. Very, very smart feature on Apollo, right? And I'll show you guys right here. It's on companies. You can include a list. And I'll actually go on Apollo just to show you guys how that would look, right? We're going to go on Apollo, move this thing right here. If you go to the search thing right here, and then you go to companies, and you go to right here, company, and include/exclude list of companies, in here, you could literally type in, like for example, Amazon.com. And when you click save and search, Amazon comes up right here. And then if you go to people, 406,000 people who work at Amazon are here on Apollo, and you can have all of their contact information. And like, let's say you want to get in contact with Princey. I can literally just click access email and boom, I have Princey's email address. And now I can take this and email her, right? So I'm sure you guys understand how you could turn websites into decision makers, right? Now back to the document. Now you straight up just configure your exact query. So let's say I come here and let's say I want to talk. And imagine I have more than one company here. Imagine it's not just Amazon, it's more than one company. I can say, okay, well, I want people that are in the United States, and I want companies that have, obviously this is only one company, but so let's say 10,000 plus employees. And let's say I want only, you could come to, for example, management level, only owners, founders, and C-suite. And now you have a list of 292 people who are all high-ranking people at Amazon. Right? CFO, technical advisor, financial director, CXO, company owner. This is literally Jeff Bezos. Like, you guys get the point, right? And you can export a list of your decision makers. And how that works is you'd literally just copy this URL right here, like that's in your browser, and you would paste it into Apollo or exportapollo.io, and that would give you back a list of the people that you want, right? So that's kind of how the Apollo scraper works. Okay? Now let's go to the next section. Now it's validating decision makers. Now it's time to talk about validating decision makers. Now we're going to talk about validating purely for cold email purposes here in order to minimize bounce rate and keep deliverability high. So we're going to be talking, and in order to do this, you're going to need an email verification tool. Now there are plenty of these tools on the market. Some of them that are pretty popular, ListClean, there's Million Verifier, and there's Hunter.io. Okay? Now, if you're not already familiar, when you export leads from any database, whether it's Apollo, whether it's Clay, it doesn't matter, any database, you're going to get 3 types of emails: valid emails, risky emails, invalid emails. Okay? Now, they're exactly what they sound like. Okay? Valid emails means that they're 100% exist. Like, guaranteed, if you send them an email, they exist. Risky emails mean that they're either a catch-all, and I'll explain what this means later in the video, or they're just invalid. Okay? And invalid emails are just 100% invalid. There's just no point of checking them. They just don't exist. Okay? Now, in this section, we're going to talk about only those valid emails. So, on average, when you upload a list to get verified, anywhere between 40 to 60% of them are actually valid. Meaning, if you get a list of 1,000 people from Apollo and you put it into a verifier, you're only going to get back anywhere from 400 to 600 contacts. Now, we're going to talk about what's going to happen with the rest of those contacts later in the video, so just keep watching. Now, these verifier tools work by sending SMTP requests to a given SMTP server to see what they're actually responding with. Now, this is all like the nerd stuff. Like, you guys don't have to understand this in order to actually do outreach, but I'm just explaining it in case you guys do want to know. Now, valid emails are always going to respond in a positive way, right? You send a request, you get back from the server, this is a valid email. Risky emails are going to respond in a way where verifiers can't easily differentiate whether that's just a catch-all, which again, I'll touch on that later, or it's just invalid. And invalid emails are typically, you could see visually that they're invalid. It's either physically the email is messed up, like there's no .com, or the domain just doesn't exist, or something like that. These are just 100% invalid, okay? Now, for those of you wondering, what is a catch-all? Now, a catch-all is a setting that you can enable on a domain, which will automatically forward all emails that come from an invalid inbox to a master inbox. So imagine you go and you email george@company.com, right? But let's say that george@company.com doesn't exist. That email address doesn't exist. Company.com is a valid domain, but it's just nobody named George works there. Now, if company.com has catch-all enabled, even though you emailed george@company.com, it'll detect, okay, this email address doesn't exist. Who should we forward it to? And let's say, they said Andrew@company.com, and let's say that's the founder. You email george@company.com, but Andrew@company.com gets the email. And that's how a catch-all works, okay? Now, if you turn that on, you basically make any email combination from that domain automatically valid. And that's kind of what catch-all is. Now, the problem with it is that there's no easy way to determine what's a catch-all and what's invalid. And just for the record, there's nothing wrong with messaging a catch-all. We do it all the time, right? Messaging a catch-all email address, no problem. Messaging invalid email addresses, that's the problem, okay? Now, here's the thing. In the next section, I'm going to talk about deep verification, which is how you verify these catch-all emails. But the key takeaway from this video or from this section is you need to get the list from Apollo using a scraper, put that list into a verifier, automatically export the valid lists, and then determine whether you want to take the verification to the next level. Okay? Now let's continue. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the deep validation of decision makers. Now, deep validation is the process of taking risky email addresses and separating the catch-alls from the straight-up invalid emails. Okay? Now, in order to understand why this is expensive and why you should not do it, you need to understand what's actually happening behind the scenes. Okay? Now, if you go on something like Gmail and you send an email to an email address that doesn't exist, you're going to get a notification back from Gmail saying that your email failed and that it bounced. Now, for those of you who've been around in the cold email game for a while, or just maybe you guys watched a video or something about it, you've probably heard the term bounce rate and the term deliverability. Now, those two values are intertwined. Bounce rate is the percentage of emails which end up bouncing from the inbox, meaning they're sent to an invalid email address. The higher your bounce rate is, the lower your deliverability will be because your reputation lowers, therefore lowering your deliverability. Okay? Now, when you do this on a personal account, it doesn't really matter, right? In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really make a difference. But when you're doing it on a business email, at high consistent volumes, your email provider is going to realize that something's being really fishy and that they're going to start lowering your deliverability to make sure you're not spamming, right? Now, this is only going to happen if you're sending emails to specifically invalid addresses. And that's why in the previous part, I said that we're only going to take the valid emails for now. Now, this is optional, and I'm going to tell you how to determine whether you should or shouldn't do this. Okay? Now, the only way to determine whether an email is a catch-all or invalid is just by sending that email address an email. Now, obviously, you can't do that off your domains because you're going to ruin your domains, and that's not good, right? And that's where these catch-all verifiers come in. What they do is they actually have a large server with a bunch of email accounts, thousands of email accounts, and they'll actually go and email every single one of those email addresses. And they're going to wait 48 to 72 hours. They're going to see who does and who doesn't respond. And then they're going to take the list of the people who do respond, or more accurately, the servers that respond with, the bounce notification, remove it from your original list, and then give you back your original list minus the rates that bounced, right? Meaning now you have a list of only the catch holes. And since they didn't respond, right, because they were valid, those are, emails that you could go and use for your outreach. Now, this is going to be a lot more expensive than any SMTP verifier because it's a lot more load and it's a lot more work to determine which email addresses are actually valid. Now, if you do want to do this, the verifier that we use is Scrubby. Now, again, this isn't my company. This isn't my tool. I have no affiliation, no affiliate code, nothing with them, right? It's just a tool that I like, and I'm just sharing it with you guys, okay? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how or when should I use, this deep verification method, right? Now, the easy solution is there is no easy solution, but I'm going to try to sort of break it down on how we determine whether we're going to do it. Now, just to be clear, whenever you do deep verification, you still have to do the SMTP verification first. In none of the situations can you just do straight up deep verification. You have to do the regular verification first because you need to get the risky emails. Now, after you did the SMTP verification and you got the risky emails, you can take those and you can put it into Scrubby or a similar tool, and there you're going to do the deep verification. Now, the way to determine that is most likely depending on your TAM. Now, let's say you're launching a campaign for a massive industry like SaaS or e-com. Now, in those two industries, there are millions of potential clients, right? So you might not need to really worry about your total addressable market. Let's say there's 10 million software companies and you scrape all 10 million. Let's say you verify all 10 million and you get back that there's 5 million real software companies that you can message. That's still a lot of leads. That's more leads than you're going to message for a long, long time. So you don't have to really worry about your TAM, your total addressable market, and you can kind of relax and not have to do this deep verification. But imagine, on the other hand, you want to target US-based bicycle manufacturing companies that have 50 to 200 employees, and they're also running Facebook ads. In that situation, your TAM is probably like under 10K. I wouldn't even be surprised if it was just 1K, right? And if you're going to verify and half your leads are going to disappear because of, the nature of email, you'd probably want to go to something like Scrubby and get back another 20 to 30% using something like Scrubby by doing a deep validation. And in that situation, because your TAM, your total addressable market, is so small, it would actually make sense to use something like Scrubby, right? So that's kind of how we determine whether we do or don't want to use it. Now, again, like everything in the outreach world, there legitimately isn't one certain way of doing things. So I can't tell you when you should and shouldn't do that, right? It's kind of up to you. The way we do it personally is based off TAM, but the way you determine that is based on you. So that's about it. But again, it just depends on a lot of factors. But that's about it for how to actually find decision makers. Now, the last part of the video is I just want to mention that if you do want all of this on a done-for-you performance basis, that is something we offer. Now, everything I went over in this video is just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's obviously a lot more complicated in practice rather than, me just explaining it briefly on a video. So if you want us to go and deliver everything I talked about above on a complete paper qualified call basis, meaning we're only going to get paid if we book you a call that shows up, the person who shows up is a decision maker, the person who shows up is an industry you guys service, the person who shows up makes enough money to work with you, and the person who shows up has at least some desire in your marketing. And they must fit those 5 criteria before you pay us. Then you can go book a free outreach consultation call below. We're going to discuss your company, your outreach strategies. We're going to talk about what would work for you, what won't work for you, and overall just sort of give you ideas on how you can scale. Now, since we work on a complete performance basis, we don't just work with anybody. We only work with companies that we are confident we can get results for, because otherwise there wouldn't be any point if we're not confident, right? Now, if you go book this call down below, worst case scenario, all you're going to do is get 30 minutes of free outreach advice. Best case scenario, we're going to work together. We're going to employ all of these strategies that I talked about above, and even more, and book you tons of calls on a paper qualified call basis. Okay? Now, I'm going to have this document in the description and this link to book in the description as well. So whatever is more convenient for you, you can go book it in. We can have a quick call. Even if you're not sure, right? I have no problem helping you out, giving you 30 minutes of time, giving you some ideas, and that's pretty much it. So if you are interested, go book a call. We can have a conversation and go from there. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys got some value from this. If you did, like and subscribe. This is a small channel, so it really will help. I notice every single person. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.